Hi, my name is Sokuzan, and I'm one of Sokuzan's monks. Sokuzan so freely offers his love to us and his wisdom through these talks, and never asks us for anything in return. If you value what he does and what he is, and want them to continue, please visit our donate page at SokukoJi.org. Thank you.
The talk title is Can't Find Space, is that it? Can't find space, you can't locate space. There are ways that it shows up, and usually it is between things. That's the space between objects, between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And we are quite fascinated by that area of our mind. The way that Trungpa Rinpoche used to talk about that in the sitting practice of meditation is to be aware of the gap. There's a kind of gap that shows up that has somewhat of a somewhat like a thing that shows up. There's just an area of the consciousness that seems to be quite a gap, but you're not sure what it's between. Might take a while to begin to have an understanding of that. But this is why I emphasize that you or me or any of us has watch the movement of the mind, watch the movement between thoughts and memories, between going off in a daydream and then coming back out of the daydream into, you're just in the room and you hear a noise down the hallway or in the zendo. If you happen to be sitting in one, you notice there's noises that will bring you back. There's a gap between what you were tied up in and then coming back. Very interesting area of consciousness where not much is happening. As I often say now, it is about awareness. It's not about figuring things out or coming to conclusions or coming even to the relative kind of understanding that most of us are leaning on in our lives in order to support our journey, our education, our money-making endeavors. We need that. We need those areas. We need medicine. We need all of that. But the sitting practice of meditation or awareness practice is about, for you personally, to see more deeply into who you are and what this fundamentally is about. We all know the story. Well, I'm getting ready to do this. I'm starting a new job. I just ended a relationship. We have all kinds of chemistry showing up there in the form of stories that keeps our ego mind company, keeps us padded, or possibly keeps us hooked on certain ideas, conclusions, judgments, opinions. It's very, very painful, as I'm sure you know. I don't need to tell you about it. But it is about the fixation on it that is the problem, not so much the situation itself. It's the grasping at it. This kind of grasping where you're hanging on to it, and the other kind of grasping where you're just going to push on it. Or the other kind of grasping, the third kind, which is a kind of grasping that is very hard to see because it is called ignorance. Ignorance form. The sitting practice of meditation that we've been doing for Ango, I've been here for some of it, not as much as I would have liked, but quite a bit initially. So the idea here is to emphasize the spaciousness of the mind, to hold very still and to observe what's coming and going in the mind, and as much as you can without grasping, rejecting, or turning away or distracting yourselves from it. It's about awareness, and there's not a particularly a big payoff in that. It may seem the opposite. It seems like we're losing ground or losing our reference points or not really making any progress. And of course, we're not. In the conventional sense, not really making progress. There are quite a few teachings that talk about progress on the path, Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by Khenpo Sotram Gyamtso. Very, very good book. Highly recommend it. Khenpo Sotram Gyamtso, Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness. You might need to study that with somebody It's not particularly easy. We studied it here as a group for a few years. We may go back to it. So there's a gap. Any questions? Got any questions, or do you have any questions? To use my fake British accent. Please help me here. Let's do this together. Yes.
Can we be in the gap and know that we're in the gap?
I think it can happen both ways. You can be in that and just notice there's a lot of space there, not much is happening. You could also be in a gap where there's more of a spaced out feeling of being lost, another kind of gap. So it can take on different kinds of textures, you could say, and still be an open dimension without reference points, particularly. More?
Do things want to come into that gap right away?
They do. And quite often we want them to. Quite often if there's too much space, we just want to fill it up with things. If you'll notice if you're in a room, you just walked into a room you thought was empty and suddenly there's 15 people in there and they all turn around to you. A big gap shows up there because it is full of what it is and completely empty of what you think it is. Therefore, it's a gap. And so what shows up the brightest, shiniest, and that area is ego. Like, what are they going to think of me? Or what are they doing? Why are they looking at me? And all the other commentary that spontaneously arises out of the self-centered mind. Go ahead.
Bowing. I notice sometimes.
What did you just call yourself?
Bowing. Bowing.
You said you doubt Boeing or Boeing?
Bowing.
Boeing like the airplane? You doubt Boeing? Boing boing? Did you ever watch that cartoon Gerald McBoing Boing? Nobody's ever seen that. God, it must be old. But go ahead, please.
Sometimes a dream that I had the night before comes in.
Yes.
But I notice as soon as I grasp at that to get the full story of the dream, it goes away.
Interesting. And what is that?
The going away or
what is that entire thing? What is it?
Awareness.
It's awareness, yes. You don't have to accomplish anything. Nothing has to subsist or continue. Nothing has to do something else. Whatever shows up is it. Awareness.
If I didn't grasp at that, would that whole dream just unfold from the?
Totally. I don't know. Maybe. I think we all noticed a little bit in our life, different places where we're not too concerned about whether we get something or some things just tend to wander in and out of consciousness. And if there's no demand happening, it's just much easier. That's probably what you're referring to. More?
Thank you.
Anyone else in here? Yeah.
On the buying, when you say can't find space, do we want to find space?
I think sometimes we want to have a little bit more relief. Maybe we're all wadded up in our thought patterns and our emotions or feelings or conclusions or contractions, or it's not about something. We just, we kind of get tired of it. Get kind of nauseated by our self-centeredness or by our demands. Sometimes we need a little space. Sometimes we can go to the sitting meditation and it tends to open up. Another time we go there and it just gets tighter. So there's no guarantee about that area more.
On the buying, when we're watching what moves, where is the space?
So there's several ways of talking about that. We have to use concepts, but there's a space between the observing part of the consciousness and the objective or what is being watching thoughts move. There's some kind of a quality of separation happening there. And eventually one starts to become aware of that space, that it's unreal. And then there's a space between thoughts and memories and ideas, and the space between any dynamic that's happening in consciousness, whether it's thoughts or any of that more. Something else you?
On the buying, So then when we say watch what moves,
Yes,
are we basically watching it against a background of space? Is that
no, conceptually, probably you are. Not necessarily. We're just watching it. That whole area of consciousness is quite astonishing. The more we, as meditators, the more we just watch what moves, it's like the less we know about we're watching, but the more we have more clarity about the lack of understanding. We're much more clear about the way in which we're confused, or the way in which we're slowly letting go of reference points. The ego mind is not happy about that, and will try to get on board with some kind of psychology that it's okay to feel spaced out or things like that. More?
so is that opening up space, or is that just an experience?
It's more like an uncovering. Space doesn't need to be opened. Already completely without boundaries.
Divine, it makes me think of, is there anything but space?
Is that a question?
Yes.
There isn't anything but space. That's very correct. But you have to see it. That's a conceptual way of talking about it. This is nothing but space. This is nothing but space. And even if you were to go into science and see what some of those dudes have been looking at for many years, you find, just like if you look out there, you find little balls of dirt and little balls of fire with enormous distances between them. The same thing when we go into atomic structures and so on. As far as I know, I haven't looked at them. I just know by what little I've read. But the whole idea of space is, things are mostly space. Welcome. Yes. Oh. Idea. Anyone else here in the window? Yes, sir.
SokukoJi bowing. If tomorrow I flash on this talk
Yes.
about the gap in space, is it okay to kind of lightly reflect on that in the day
I
if
think
it pops
so.
up?
I think it is that we have these talks, and each one of us, some of us may go away from this talk and never think about it again. Another person may reflect on that quite a bit. Just like Chisho, the last couple of days, he's been reading out of Embracing Mind by Kobun Roshi, the only book that is out there of his talks, which are, I might add, are good, but they're highly edited. If you ever listen to him talk, he doesn't talk like that book. But that's something for Chisho and for me too. I really like that piece that he's been reading. That's a very spacious way of talking about the nature of consciousness as we're doing sitting meditation. So I think it's different with each person. Some people will really use a particular teaching or a lot to get a better understanding. Some people will use a very similar situation, except some people will use concepts and ideas and judgments and evaluations to keep people away from the truth, go into their psychology and what they believe and so a very interesting area. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Did I answer your question? Sure.
What was it?
What was it? What do we have out there in Zoom land? Any questions there? Go ahead, Farid.
Farid bowing.
I promise, right? Farid?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Good.
Always you said observe your thoughts, and I find out that I either lost in thought or have no thought. What's the problem here?
There's no problem. There's absolutely no problem. That's a great comment or description, but until you say, what's the problem? Up until that point, there was no problem. And then all of a sudden, a problem. But you're doing exactly what you need to do. It will rotate. There'll be times when you're lost in thought. That's awareness. There are times when you're don't feel like you're having any thought at all. That's awareness. And you know, 5 people, 10 people, 300 people on the road may never go through the kind of experience that you go through as you practice. It is your practice, and it can be full of space. It can be all clogged up with all kinds of daydreams and thoughts and memories and conclusions. Not a problem. The important thing is to be aware of it. Just be aware of what comes and goes in the mind stream, because eventually that which is observing that, even if it's observing, I'm thinking all the time, or even if it's observing, I'm not thinking about anything, I'm just totally spaced out. But all of those are awareness. It just takes a while to get a deep understanding in your heart, not just in your thought process, but of what is the observing quality, observing part of awareness, and what is being observed. You have to see that. I can sit and talk about non-duality all day. It's here, it's there. No, it's not. It's neither, it's both. We can go, Nagarjuna did 2,000 years ago, talked about that in concepts, which help people approach it conceptually, but the fundamental understanding seems to be necessary to happen. There has to be a transformation at the basis of consciousness, which is a very relative way of referring to the Ali Vijnana, or the storehouse consciousness from the Yogacara tradition. Doesn't mean it has to happen that way for you so that you somehow line up with all those teachings or concepts, but they may help you. And just like what I'm saying to you, Fareed, you're doing exactly what you need to do. The only thing I would emphasize is maybe, we talked about it, might be different, but I would say probably do more. Have more of a willingness to experience not much is happening, or more of a willingness to experience you're going this way and that way, and all kinds of daydreams and soap operas going on. Don't worry about it. It's about awareness, not about what arises in the awareness. It's about awareness, not about the lack of something arising in awareness. Amazing. Thank you for the question, Fareed.
Thank you.
Yes, Jishin. Almost changed your name there.
Jishin bowing. Does observing what moves situate consciousness in perception only? Bowing.
Good question. Yes and no. Good answer. So to some extent, because you're using a concept to talk about it. So yes, there's probably going to be some of that happening, but there can't be any result there because we're right back to relative truth. It's better than that. It's worse than that. It's better because liberation, consciousness is liberated from the singularity, the positionality, the grasping at a self, the grasping at another. Liberation. And yet nothing has happened because the ultimate understanding is there never was a relative truth anyway. This is an illusion. Enjoy yourself or fight with it if you want to.
Jishin bowing. I have one more.
I bet you do.
Does perception only allow consciousness to see itself? Bowing.
I want you to paraphrase your question. I appreciate your question. I'm not trying to make things difficult for you, but I'd like you to paraphrase what you just said. I want to see a way in which you're understanding what you've asked me. He's looking at the ceiling. In case you guys are wondering.
This is how I'm thinking.
I know. And I'm commenting on it, I guess.
Can consciousness see itself without perception only?
Yes. You can. Perception only, the concept is to help us to get there. Eventually, even that is just more malarkey. Just more structures and ideas. Eventually, nothing happens. There's no occurrence. This is an illusion. A really strong one. Hurts. The nerve endings are there and are powerful and are receiving the other part of the illusion, which are the objects, the things, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the touch, everything. We're completely embraced by this amazing world of all the wonderful flavors and tastes and feelings and enjoyments and pleasures and pain, suffering. It's just, we're flooded with that all the time. And all that's being said here from the point of view of this old teacher is just receive it. Some of it may feel pretty good. Some of it's going to feel pretty bad. If you can receive it without comment. That's why we don't have to do some kind of crazy controlling our minds or celibacy or don't eat this, don't eat that, and all kinds of controlling things. You don't have to do that. And again, if you come to me and say, I feel better if I do this, this, and that, then please go ahead and do that. There's no rule or regulation that you can live up to. It's going to help you particularly.
Thank you.
Welcome. Morning. Yes,
Nathan
sir.
Bowing.
Yes, sir.
Is receiving grasping liberation?
Again,
Is receiving grasping liberation?
there's an aspect to it, yes, when you just don't care whether you grasp or not. So that tends to cut. If you're trying to not grasp, there is a teaching. There's a structures that try to help us to stop grasping. Of course, we study Buddhism and all. You're going to see all kinds of that, or any spiritual path, more than likely. So, but it's very important to be aware of the grasping before you just shut it off, before you're really clear on what it is. It takes a lot of guts. To use a blunt word, because you might not look good to other people who see you grasping and rejecting, shutting down, see you, it looks like you're swamped by the three poisons. When you're actually not swamped by the three poisons, you're actually working with your world as it arises. And it's going to show up different for you, different for her, different for him, so different. That's why it's so necessary to have a teaching person who can meet you in the middle of your crap and encourage you to go into it. If you're ready for it, and you may not be. And I'm not saying I'm this wonderful teacher that I can meet everybody where they're at, but probably a dozen or two I can. The rest of the people are out of luck. Did I get close? There's a lot more there.
Nathan Bowing. Is perhaps indulging in grasping at times the only way to be liberated from it?
Yes. But that needs to come out of the way I see it, which is not like the right way to see it, and everybody else needs to do what this old guy says. But probably my experience is, which is a lot of years, I would say, yes, there's some area there where you yourself have to enter into that cave of demons and actually work with that situation itself, rather than try to live. Because as long as you're trying to live up to some kind of a standard, you never get to see that aspect of consciousness where the passion, aggression, and ignorance is actually fueling the ego and keeping that, perpetuating that self-centered person who wants to get somewhere. That self-centered person on the spiritual path who wants liberation, but wants it the way they think it should be rather than the way it is, because the way it is devastating the ego. So more if you have.
Nathan Bowing. I forgot how to phrase this. I guess I feel like I'm fueling that grasping just through more grasping at times. But it maybe doesn't feel like there's any way out of that cycle of fueling it.
I don't think there's any way out of it, but there's a way into it. And that's to just go right in and have a willingness to be whatever shows up, be genuine. As my teacher would say, just be genuine. No more pretense about who you are, or you're better than others, or you're just not going to do that anymore. Even if other people look at you and think you're confused or whatever, you're not too concerned, if at all, with what other people think, because you know it's so important for you to know right here what is the truth and what's not the truth. Someone else can come along and lay something on and judge you and even be mean to you. I'm not saying you might not be beat back or yell at them or tell them off or something, but the fundamental understanding is, if you see this suffering that's here, you see it in others. You see people trying to get rid of their suffering by blaming others. It's everywhere. It's disgusting. It's also heartbreaking. But I can't do it for you. Can't do it for you or you or you. Can't do it for anybody. The only thing I can do is, if you give me the benefit of the doubt, you come this way, I can help you see where to look. Perhaps, and if I can't, then I can't. More?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Further question? Here in the Zendo?
When you're bowing, is there spaciousness in projections? Bowing.
You see that you're projecting? Is that what you mean? You see that you're projecting onto something? You see that something shows up and you have ideas about it, you're interpreting it and thinking about what it is. Can be spacious also. It's the grasping part of the locking down. People can have lots of disturbing, crazy ideas, but they don't lock down on them, then they're not imprisoned by them. They're just wandering in the jungle, bumping into stuff. But as soon as they tangle with something, then that's the life form that shows up right there as being a knot of what passion, aggression, ignorance, hope, and fear, right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, should be and shouldn't be.
When you're vowing, can we stop having projections?
No. You don't
Does-
need to. You don't need to stop anything.
Do you project?
Of course. Been doing it all day. Doing it now. Plenty of room for questions there if you're able to turn the concepts in such a way as they can actually come out your vocal cords. Because you can know about something you want to know, but to turn what you want to know into structures and language, not easy without getting caught. You should, your next question will be, well, do you get caught?
Do you get caught?
All the time. Right now, I'm totally caught. I'm hooked on everything. I couldn't help anybody if I were somehow not hooked anymore. Above everything. The teacher up on a high platform. No, I'm sitting in the middle of the same fire that you are.
And you're vowing, when do projections become harmful, vowing?
If you think you have to get rid of them, fight them. If you think you need to justify them, there's aggression and passion. And if you think you have to just dismiss them or get rid of them or cover them up or distract yourself from that thing, which is too painful to look at, to this thing over here that probably is more important to look at anyway. Little conversations around it. Did I get close to what you're looking for?
When you're vowing, are projections the truth?
Relatively. They have a relative validity to them. That's why they're so believable. And that's why you can have three people sit around and talk about some other situation and all kind of agree on it, except for this one thing where one person takes exception to that one thing you said, which just gives it more validity because there's this openness for it. You know what I mean? Don't you know?
I'm not sure.
Don't you dare say that to me.
I'm not sure.
So sick of hearing that. Go ahead.
When you're vowing, if you say we're always, or you say we're always projecting, are we always
I'm not
projecting?
accusing you of anything, but probably there's quite a bit of that.
And somehow that has a negative connotation to it, it seems.
It does.
What is the negative
It's
aspect of
just a dynamic in consciousness that has a lot of aggression in it, or passion, or grasping. But all you have to do is see it. You don't have to get rid of it. Getting rid of it creates someone who got rid of something, who's improving, no longer projects, is no longer at the mercy of passion, aggression, and ignorance. Ego.
when you're vowing? Can projections be beneficial?
Give me an example of where you're coming from with the question.
When you're vowing, well, if we're always projecting, and you say that sometimes we get stuck on that projection.
Yeah.
Or you project. Because if you didn't, then you would be someone who's above what happens to us.
A way of talking about it, yes.
I guess I'm looking for the spaciousness in projections and the fluidity.
Can't find space. So you can find space relatively, but ultimate space, you are not separate from that. You have to realize it. If you do, it's devastating to the ego. The ego is not like that feeling of not knowing what's going to happen next. especially if it's still hooked on the idea that there is a next. It's terrifying. And it's easier to just get mad at everything and just have a fit and blame other people for how you're feeling or other situations for how you're feeling. Just easier, painful, but at least you don't have to hang out in the spaciousness of not knowing. And when you said, I don't know, or I'm not sure, that's not spaciousness.
What is it?
Ignorance.
What makes it ignorance?
Because you do know. You do know. Everyone in here, you know what this is. You just avoid it. And you may spend the rest of your life covering it up. And I'm saying you don't have to do that. And you may cover it up by like what Nathan is at. Nathan was asking about the, to be kind of put upon by the things that are coming and going, wondering should we indulge that or not indulge it. I'm not saying you said that, but it's like there's an area in there where I just go ahead and do this, or do I hold back and hold my horses and get some kind of idea of discipline or control, self-control.
Lost.
You're lost. That's space. They should make a movie, Lost in Space. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Shanji, I'm bowing. If there's a dynamic that's going on physically or emotionally that has a constancy to it, where's the space in that?
That is the space. The very idea of constancy or that keeps going, that is the spaciousness of it. So, but if you try to get rid of it, if you give it a solidity by trying to stop it, you give it a solidity by trying to intercept it, you give it a solidity. But the thing in itself that you're talking about is space. Liberate yourself. You can do it. You can just look at that. It's as if you were in that and you just didn't care whether it ever went away or not. In other words, it's like you're slowly weaning yourself away from the addiction to time and space, past and future. And one of the ways that shows up is you don't care what happens. And at the same time, you're highly, highly affected by what's coming and going in your relationships and other people and your life, which can really be painful. And the only place to turn to about any kind of understanding would be the first noble truth of the Buddha. Just being alive is suffering. We keep thinking that we can somehow get into the really nice feeling all the time. And it's not a nihilism. It's not wrong. It's not something where we shouldn't feel bad or something like that. We tend to try to lecture ourselves in that area more.
Shanji, I'm bowing. When you say that constancy is the space, where's the space in something?
It's beyond the intellectual part of the thinking process, the conceptual part. Conceptually, no, it's not spacious at all. It's tied up in knots, and it's in it every time you turn around. There it is. There it is. There it is. But to look at that, and I can't be completely clear on what it is you're describing, but it's just going by your experience of it and your description of it. Insofar as you can just receive whatever happens without comment, without accepting it, receive whatever happens with no filter, not like I'm going to accept this. You don't have to do that. You just, however it shows up, just receive it. I don't know how to put it more clearly than that without getting caught up in concepts about it. It's just whatever it is, the very thing you're pointing to that seems to have some kind of continuity to it, to just receive that. As if it was a fishing line that you could never reel it all in. You ever fish?
Sometimes.
Me neither. I hear you. Sir.
Sokuzan, are there gaps in projections?
Yes. Yes, sometimes they come apart in such a way that it's a little frightening. You can realize that something we thought was true just doesn't have the continuity we thought it had. That's helped us to feel secure about our opinion or our idea. Our judgment is about something starts to collapse and come apart. So it can be a little embarrassing sometimes. Is that what you're asking about? But you can't necessarily gouge a hole in that to make that happen. It has to be done through, I feel, and I'm biased here, sitting practice of meditation, shikantaza. It won't happen necessarily on the cushion, but it may happen as you're walking across the kitchen you just vaguely or just randomly reflect on such a situation. You realize that you have no proof for that. There's no reality there. You're feeling your emotion. You're clamping down on that is based on fear or on wanting things to be a certain way so that you can take a certain stand on it against this or for that. You must have already experienced that or you couldn't ask about it. More.
Sokuzan, sometimes I have that experience looking at a person and I can't figure out what is there. And that's a little terrifying. It's like your child or someone you know. Yeah. And so I guess I'm asking it out of, if that was happening all the time, I'm not sure I could even function.
That's the seed of no self. That's the seed of seeing no self, to look at someone and have a kind of a feeling of terror coming up because you're not sure. Might even be somebody you see every day, and you just look at them in such a way that you realize there's no one there. There's no one here. There's no one there, and that would be the seed. A way of talking about it. The seed of seeing the totality of everything. Everything is without a self, without an other. When that is complete, it's completely ordinary. You're no longer frightened by anything. You're no longer terrified. It's no longer a seed. It's just that. More. Koshin. Thank you.
Koshin bowing.
Yes, sir.
What's the relationship of emotions to the gap?
I think it's variable in terms of emotions to the gap or concepts or thoughts or conclusions or analysis to that, but it's very much about filling that space up with something, even if it's emotion, even if it's a thought process, even if it's concluding something or analyzing something. Is that where you were asking about, or did I miss what your inquiry was about?
Koshin bowing. Is there a difference between the relation of thoughts to the gap and emotions to the gap?
So Trungpa Rinpoche once referred to, when asked, what are emotions? And he said they're just high-speed thoughts. So I think it's kind of a cop-out on his part. But then again, I can't come up with anything much better to describe it. It's just like that whole dynamic of thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling. They're so, it's so arm in arm kind of thing. There are some people who are highly conceptual and are totally involved in concepts and ideas all the time. Their emotional dynamic is there, and it doesn't mean they're not having really intense emotions also. They just might be, there might be a lot of glossolalia or words around that to kind of protect that emotion or give it some kind of a shape. Because emotions don't seem to have much of a shape, but they sure have a texture. They can be extremely emotional. But we have thoughts along with that protect that or serve to continue, perpetuate, or validate that, then that whole thing, both emotions and thoughts, can fill up that gap. So sitting practice of meditation will allow you to spend some time just in an open dimension. That's a gap. You might not have an experience of being in a gap because experiences tend to have some kind of a quality or texture or substance to it, so you can recall it or describe it. So it might be more of an open dimension where you're not sure what's going on. Somewhat along the lines of what Sokuzan was asking about, when sometimes he meets someone and is completely, shall we say, liquefied by the apparent reality of things that doesn't have any substance to it anymore. That's a beginning of seeing that there is no solid being anywhere. Takes a while. More, Kosheen.
Bowing. Yeah, one quick follow-up. So it sounds like it's similar to what you were talking about before with thinking that strong emotion comes up and there's more of a gap when there's not the locking down with aversion, passion, ignorance. If there's not as much that, then that creates more spaciousness. Well, as, for instance, a strong emotion comes up.
I don't know if I'd say it creates more spaciousness, but there's just less there. So the space that was already there is just is more experiential, maybe in consciousness as being not much of a reference point to anything, including the distance between things. All of that starts to come apart.
Yeah.
Welcome. Could take a couple more questions if there are. Are there any in here?
Jishin Bowing.
Jishin.
Is the first thought that comes to us before we start projecting on it also a projection of our mind? Bowing.
Probably. So I wouldn't block down on and say every time, but probably more than likely that's what we say first thought that shows up. It's not that the first thought is going to be correct, just like Trungpa Rinpoche would say first thought, best thought. But what he was trying to do, I feel, from my experience of working with him, is to get you to be very immediate and simple. Well, whatever shows up, just relate with that. Not that that's the truth, you can hang your hat on it, but better than go off into some kind of trajectory about right and wrong, should be, shouldn't be, up and down, back and forth. Deb, go ahead.
Deb Bowing. Sokuzan, I've been trying to formulate a question, and I'll do my best here. Lately, my relative reality has been extremely overwhelming. I've interviewed with you, and I know I've talked to you about the fact that I have a transgender son. And so the world for me right now, my relative reality on the ground, it just seems unbearable at times right now. I am sitting and I'm trying to watch that. And but my question would be, as a mother of a child that is at high risk right now for harm, that's real to me. That's the reality I have to live in. How, besides the sitting and the clamping, I feel like if I don't clamp down, something bad is going to happen, because the clamping down keeps me focused on, it's like going to war. It's the enemy. I mean, by my teachings, when I sit with you, I don't want to go to war, but yet I feel like if my swords aren't drawn, any moment something terrible could happen to my child. Do you have anything that you might be able to share with me around that? Deb Bowing.
I certainly can try. Of course, I'm at a distance. I also have that situation in my family with one of my grandchildren, so I have a little bit of an idea of it. Not a lot, not like you do, but a lot. But it's a very not to mention other people in our community who are dealing with craziness in the world. So I can't see anything there that other than to continue what you're doing. Try to sit a lot so you're as clear as possible about your passion, aggression, and ignorance, and about the way the whole structure of the world. This is a huge landslide that's happening. It's not something we can, as you've heard me say, I don't mean to be silly or disrespectful to anybody, but we just can't run in the middle of that with a protest sign and stop it. It has a cause and effect that is totally coming from the insane world that we're all have been downloaded into. So I would say stay in touch with the community, stay in touch with people who are supportive of you. In our community, people are very supportive of, just as a general idea of people who are have that kind of what is called transgender. So we've been dealing with that. All of us have been dealing with aspects of that kind of gender, shall we call it, confusion or prejudice in that area, that don't really allow and don't really respect other people. It's just, and it's coming out of the fear of others. People are so threatened by anything that's the slightest bit different than what they are. So the only thing I can say is sitting, try to continue to study the Dharma. And if there are groups, I'm not sure what state are you in?
Deb Bowing, I'm in Massachusetts and I have hooked into PFLAG. Tonight I have actually a meeting on Zoom too, but and so that is helpful. But again, it just feels like my life is one clamping down after another right now.
Does your child live with you?
No, but he's down the road now. He was in Boston and that was a safer place for him, but he's in an area now that is not as safe.
Yeah.
So, but I see him all the time.
Good. Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate that way. Well, thank you, Sokuzan. I will continue to sit and continue to be part of the community. So
Part of the community.
thank you.
And our community is going through all kinds of, as you maybe know already, all kinds of chaotic stuff. But the core of the community is still here. We're still going to continue, and we aren't going to stir things up, make anything worse if we can help it. But there's a lot of confusion going on. People believing in their thoughts, believing in their emotions. Not a good idea to do that, but sometimes you can't help it.
Thank you, Deb Bowing.
Thank you. Any final question in here? Any final question on Zoom? Is there any, just usually don't go into this kind of area, but since this is the last question, is there, if anybody has any organizations or anything that they feel might be supportive to Deb and her offspring there, you can communicate directly or leave something on, is there some way to do that on here?
On chat or the SokukoJi contact on the website, and we can pass it on to Deb.
Yeah, SokukoJi contact on the website. So if you have some ideas about that, maybe people know we can work together on this. There's got to be some kind of community beyond just sitting and facing a wall all the time.
Sanji Bowing. Sanji Bowing.
Go ahead.
Trump thinks he's in control right now. He thinks he's really in control. Back in 1971, we had a president who thought he was in control. And because he thought he was in control, he started making mistakes. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And thank you to all of you for attending these talks. If you keep showing up, I'll keep showing up. It's that simple. I have no guarantees, no promises of anything. But I just encourage you, find out who you are. Don't go another day without having an intention to see who you are fundamentally. If you see who you are, well, I'm not going to go any further than that. That's all you're going to get from me. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Sokuzan, and I'm one of Sokuzan's monks. Sokuzan so freely offers his love to us and his wisdom through these talks, and never asks us for anything in return. If you value what he does and what he is, and want them to continue, please visit our donate page at sokukoji.org. Thank you.